You know, he tends to come around every now and then, right? And he's done something amazing, in my opinion, with a book that he's written. So the aim of this stream is to understand what is this book about, you know, all the whys, hows, you know, how was it created? Why was it created? What's the motivation? What's the inspiration? Okay, so in a bit, we're going to have Diego up. My bad, Diego. And shout out to Diego Ife, the Boone podcast. Okay, he's the author of this book. Okay. Salute. What can I say? My newish intro. New arms, new legs. Just be a machine, bro. Hashtag TSS. Okay. These are self-refining discussions, physical, mental, spiritual, also cultural. Okay. And in the crosshairs tonight, we're gonna dissect and understand what Diego's book is about: ethnic escapism and the black burden. Okay, so once again, salute to everyone in the building. Please, can I just get a one just to confirm that the sound is a-okay? No interruptions, no silliness in the chat. I mean, with the mic, respect to the chat. What can I say, man? I just recently came back down from Scotland, man, and I really recommend this beautiful country, man. Very good for rejuvenation, recovery. So I recently got back, and I kind of get lazy when I don't stream as much, but I wanted to make this happen. Okay, I appreciate the one. Salute to everyone in the building. I hope everyone's doing good. Gerald in the building. I'm gonna shout out everyone in the building. KB Jones, brother in the building. Good to see you, bro. Mr. Strider in the building. Good to see you, bro. Good to see you. I appreciate that. Sound is good. So yeah, I mean, some people are talking about a travel group, yeah, and I'll be up for that. I'll be up for that. But obviously, any sort of discussions about that is going to be a private affair. So I'd recommend you come down to the Self Refinement City, which is our Discord, right? So we can speak very intimately about these ideas, and we can discuss potential locations which we can journey to together as a group. I've always been about that, I've always been about that level of quote unquote intimacy, right? This doesn't just have to be an online YouTube thing. It can evolve into something else, right? But naturally, we got some sickos around here, so we need to make it a private affair. Okay, but we're here to discuss Diego Ife's book, and my bad, Diego, man. I couldn't log into the Discord from here, but I put the link in the chat. He says he'll be right back. Salute to Diego Ife. He'll be right back, but the link's here for Diego. We want to understand what this book is about. Of course, on this channel, ideas of being an ethnic minority and what that entails, what it means, right? We also talk about that in depth too, right? Because it's very important to us as ethnic minorities, as so-called Black British people. So I really do believe that this book that Diego wrote is very conducive to that ethos and mentality, right? Okay, Diego, before Diego comes up, I wanted to do something kind of funny. Let's review some breaking news in the UK. Okay, we got Diego in the building. Diego's up here. I'm gonna bring him up in a sec. Salute to brother Diego. Yeah, let's quickly review some stuff with regards to breaking news in the UK. Let's see what we've got. Someone in the chat says I'm looking suave. Yeah, I had to do my Kevin Samuel accent for this one. I was about to play Kevin Samuel's tune for this one. Okay, but let's see what's breaking today. Just to get everyone in the room to warm up, to not just jump to the center of the cake. But let's see what's trending in the news. Voice. Who remembers Voice? Black British paper. We got Nigeria on top of the football world as they stun host Australia. So if you don't know, it's the Women's World Cup football. So apparently Nigeria is doing pretty well. Goals by Kanu, Ohale, Oshoala gave the Super Falcons a memorable win, and they now top Group B. Right, so they've beaten Australia 3-2. Australia are hosting this tournament, so it's good to see that. Nigeria scored an equalizer through Uchenna Kanu with the last kick of the half, and they took the lead in the 65th minute as Oshinachi Ohale headed home bravely at the far post. Right. So anyone interested in the Women's World Cup? Anyone interested in the Women's World Cup? I was watching it and I was asked, I didn't know you were into women's sports, because I believe the tennis is on as well. So it was a surprise to some. 1 second, let me just change one thing. What's up? What's next up on the breaking news, man? Something that caught my eye. Mali drops French as official language. That's quite big for me, okay? 13 other national language spoken in Mali will receive official language status, but French will be dropped off. That's big. So it's from a landmark vote. The language, French, has been the West African country's official language since 1960. Following a referendum in June, an overwhelming 97% of voters voted for French to no longer be an official language. However, the language will still be a working language from now on. Okay, but hey, again, post-colonialism, very akin to what we kind of try to unravel over here. So colonial powers are getting the boot to some degree. I don't know how effective it will be, but hey, that's something, correct? That's something. One more. What else do we have today? What else do we have in breaking news? I saw one about the pandemic, but maybe that's a bit too much. Okay, let's see this. The Caribbean. Off with their heads. Caribbean chop monarch's mug from notes. Another sign of the resistance to post-colonialism. The Eastern Caribbean will begin public consultation on what should replace the Queen's image on their currency. The British monarch image will be axed from the Eastern Caribbean currency notes used by 8 countries in the region. The change was approved by the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Monetary Council, ECCB, at a 105th meeting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines on 21st of July. Okay, so hey, this seems to be the wave, right? Former colonies are fighting back and they're saying no, they're resisting. But yeah, I might, sometimes do a brief kind of intro with breaking news, because there's a lot of stuff we need to cover, we need to know about, but I can't reach everything, right? But it's good to know. Shout out to The Voice magazine. But most importantly, this is Amazon. No, the screen hasn't changed, my bad. 1 sec. Let me stop this. Let me present that. Ethnic escapism and the black burden is what we're going to talk about tonight, okay? I don't envisage this to be a long one, but we want to really, understand what the book is about, and also understand who Diego Ife is. Most of us know who he is, but for the uninitiated, it's very good to know what he's about. So the link to buy the book is in the description below. We're going to discuss the book, but if you are interested in these types of ideas around ethnicity, I would really very much recommend it, man. Diego was nice enough to provide me with a ebook version, right, which I haven't finished reading, but from what I've read, I can tell that this book is the type of book that you can tell a lot of research and thought and TLC has gone into it. You know, I think we don't really see a lot of books that go into detail when it comes to pre-colonial African times and, you know, the kind of scenario and systems that's been happening over there, right? Because most of that is coming from normally, or, you know, more so from European sources, which often a lot of detail gets chucked by the side, right? So that's the main thing that I picked up on when reading this book. Like, the level of detail, I already knew, man, from the first chapter, that this is a book that will be very special and it's very rare. And this is why I wanted to do this, you know, kind of review and interview of the author, because I think it's something people need to get behind, people need to support, not just for the sake of supporting, but this is real information that not a lot of people know, right? Not a lot of us appreciate. Do you know what I mean? But with that being said as well, I know I'm rambling, but with that being said, Diego's link is in the description of the video to the below as well. So check out his channel. We're going to talk about his channel as well and his viewpoints. Check out his channel. Subscribe to Diego Ife's channel on YouTube as well. Let's show some support. But with that being said, salute to everyone in the building. Let me quickly give a roll call, because I've already seen some love in the building, man. Salute to everyone in the building. First one in was JM Talks in the building. Salute to JM Talks channel, man. Good to have you. Another content creator in the building. Always good to see brother JM, man. Always there. You know, reliable, ready, focused. But also salute to Ifechi Michael in the building, man. I really appreciate you. Always showing support as well. So you get the gunshots. I need to improve the speed and delivery of that. But hey, salute to Ifechi Michael, man. I really appreciate the £1 super chat, man. Good to have you in the building, already showing support before the stream has even begun. Of course, we got Diego Ife, the Booncast, the Boon Podcast in the building. Okay, I'm going to bring him up in a sec. Salute to Diego Ife. And another content creator here in the UK, KB Jones, coming through. We need another gunshot for that. Really appreciate that. With the $2.99 super sticker, man. I really appreciate KB Jones, another content creator, man. You need to check him out as well. You know, I see the numbers coming up as well. He's coming up to 1K subs as well. So awesome to see. That's what I want to see. I want to see a lot of us prosper and, you know, be able to deliver our message to a wider audience of people, right? So salute to KB Jones in the building. We got online account in the building. Salute to you, bro. KB Jones says, please like, share, and subscribe. Absolutely. If you want to see more content like this, if you like the type of content that I produce, I recommend you at least like the video, subscribe. If you can do so, share it. And there are other means of supporting as well via the super chat, super sticker procedure, or you can even join the channel, right? But I appreciate everyone just being here. You can leave comments, and that's also good enough. So salute to everyone. Who else is in the building? Gerald Ola in the building. Salute to you. Says, is the glasses for short sight or long sight? No, man. This is just what do they call it on the stage in pantomime? This is just a prop. I don't need glasses. Actually, it's not a prop. It's blue light filtering glasses. So it's good for someone who's always on the computer, blocking out the blue light from the screens. I tell a lie. So very important as well. Very important. Who else in the building? We've got Mr. Strider in the building. Salute to you, bro. Salute to you. Good to see the regulars in the building. Damn, I just remembered that I haven't hooked up my internet to this device, man. So if it gets choppy, let me know, and I'll just quickly do that. Apologies, man. Again, you know, amateur. Online account in the building says, looking suave and clean cut. I appreciate that, bro. Love it, bro. Hope you can do these more with a lot of interviews. Yeah, I want to do more one-on-ones with similar content creators, right? I think, again, that those collabs just strengthen the whole so-called community, right? And also I want to showcase that I'm not like I'm not a dirty macking type of guy. I want to see people prosper. I want to see us as a group improve and rise up. You know what I mean? Eunice Osman in the building. Salute to you, bro. Good to see you in the building. Who else? Daniel Karoma in the building. Good to see you, bro. A regular over at King Rich's channel. Salute. Good to see you here in the building. Okay. Appreciate that, KB Jones. KB Jones already putting up the links for Diego's channel. So check out Diego's channel. We're going to bring up Diego now. Before we do, though, again, more support from the brother Strider, always coming through. Oh, salute to Strider, man. I really appreciate the $4.99 super chat, man. I really appreciate that and all your consistent support in previous streams, man. I appreciate it. He says, shout out to Diego on his contribution to perspectives pertaining to our predicament as ethnic minorities in this country. Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, absolutely. I don't know. Sometimes I think Diego can be a divisive figure when it comes to the streams based on some comments. And I don't know why, you know, and this I think stems from some of our affliction as a group. Like for minuscule reasons, we are ready to send violations to people for very small reasons. I think Diego has always provided great insight and great researched information, right? That has made all of us think twice about what we're talking about, particularly when we're talking about Black British stuff, right? The identity, what is an ethnicity? You know what I mean? So absolute salute to Diego in the building. And I really appreciate you, Uchiha Strider. Exactly. JM Talk says, it's a difference of opinion that's okay. Absolutely. I respect anyone that has an opinion. You know, I don't know if you can tell in the self-refinement city, man, anyone that has that parrot, echo chamber, repeat talking points, nah, I can't deal with it, man. Anyone that can come in 2023 with a personal perspective, their own point of view, for me is gold, because that tells me that person is thinking and is not under some brainwashing protocol. You know what I mean? But with that being said, man, it's time to bring up Diego Ife, who is the man of this stream. Diego, first of all, forgive me for the delays and, you know, for all the quirks that I do in my opener, man. Forgive me for any delays today. But
yeah, no problem, man. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sound is perfect, and wonderful. Your visuals are perfect as well. Salute to that. First of all, man, how you been? How you doing this evening?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. You know, the work doesn't really stop, to be honest, but you know, just stay pushing it, to be honest. Yeah, no complaints, you know, encouraged and looking forward to, you know, this stream and keeping the work going, man. Yeah, how about you? How's things with you?
I appreciate it. I can't complain as well, man. You know, had a nice long holiday. It was very effortless, you know. A lot of you know, just appreciation. It's good to be back as well, you know. So yeah, I can't complain too, man. Good times.
It's good to hear, man. We love to hear that stuff.
Yeah, appreciate that. But you know, like I said, I know a lot of the people in the chat right now know who you are, right? But
yeah,
what typically happens with live streams is that the most viewers attend after it's aired, you know. So a lot of this might be repetitive, but I want the uninitiated to know more about you. You know what I mean? So I want this to be a bit more of you know, not an interrogation or anything like that, just to know who you are, what Diego is about, you know. So I think I'll start with, where are you from and how would you class your ethnicity? If that's not too personal. If anything's too personal, just
no.
say, hey, Falcon, man.
No problem at all, man. No problem at all. So to those who don't know who I am, my name is Diego Ife. That's my sort of pen name / shall I say media name, if you will. I am the writer of the book Ethnic Escapism and the Black Burden. And I also do a podcast, which I did unfortunately have to put on hold just to meet my publishing sort of obligations. And aside of sort of being a writer, I actually have, well, I have other books coming out. I'm also an economist, so sort of got two on my third degree in economics. Part of that was really about contributing to development on the African continent. At least that was the thinking at the time, when I first went into the course. And yeah, I'm sort of passionate about research. I'm passionate about sort of learning new things, but also trying to make sense of them and sort of critiquing them. It's all good and well being able to reel off facts upon facts, but if you're not able to critique them, maybe add something valuable or like another perspective, right? Then I don't see it as worthwhile. So these are the things that make me passionate. There are going to be certain things I'm going to say which might not necessarily be popular, but it's not with bad intentions. It's really when you've done a certain level of research and by extension had a lot of time to think, right? You develop certain convictions, and I can't be apologetic for those convictions. This is practically 7 years in the making, to be honest, with this particular book. So yeah, I mean, I want to make a difference. And I think that probably just sums me up, to be honest.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate that. I want to ask the second part of that question. How would you class your ethnicity today? Because I know this is something that, we've done similar streams where you've kind of indicated how you feel, especially particularly about perhaps the Black British kind of identifier, if we can say.
Sure.
But how would you class your ethnic minority today?
Sure.
If you
So yeah, sure, no problem. So I would say the easiest way as a point of reference, though I've obviously kicked back against the British Black or Black British label, purely for ease of reference, I identify as a Black Brit, a Londoner, and someone of predominantly Nigerian heritage with ethnicities in other African countries and other kind of nominal DNA. So, but yeah, that's the best way I'd sum myself up. Yeah.
Okay, absolutely. We got another support from brother Strider with the $4.99 super chat. Really appreciate your support, bro. He says, "Are you doing a DBA, Diego? I won't be left behind."
No. It's a PhD in economics.
Right.
So right now I'm just getting the requirements that I need, 2 research papers to be upgraded to the next stage of the study. So yeah. But a DBA is a good course. I do have to say it's definitely a good course. Yeah.
Sorry, man, I'm ignorant. What is DBA?
It's a doctorate in business administration.
Oh, right.
So you've got like an MBA. It's the sort of the doctoral version of an MBA. Yeah.
I hear that. Sounds like Strider might be in the might be there. So salute to you if you're in line to study that. But I appreciate the support, Strider. Salute to you. Okay, so more or less we could say you're Black British. Would you accept that term?
Yeah, although obviously I have my issues with the term. For ease of reference, it literally I'm classified as Black. I guess that's universally without any sort of dispute. And I have a British passport, and to a great extent my experiences on these shores have probably characterized me more than my heritage. And obviously I make no secret of it in the book, and I've probably said it on several streams in the past. It's almost like a continual journey of discovery. No one can have all the answers, and I, among many others, do not have all the answers, especially as it comes down to matters of identity. What I have tried to do, though, is kind of contour certain things that I and others can look out for, which can help us to make sense of our realities.
Absolutely. Okay, so we understand you might have certain qualms about the label, but I want to ask, what is it about the idea of the Black British label in whatever fashion you want to use it as? What is kind of so-called wrong with that label, or what is the problem with the Black British term
So
for you?
it's good No, good question or questions.
Mm,
My issue with it is this, right? Um, One, the idea of being called in quote black in terms of like government stats or data or what have you is a new concept. It's new. Um, we're talking about like I said, 1991. Its inspiration was derived from the US. So in many ways, when many Black Brits try to conceptualize their realities and who they are and what makes them what they are, there's a tendency, and this is not a criticism, it's just more an observation or observable reality. There's this tendency to look across the pond to make sense of identity. So it's almost like, okay, Black American, Black Brit. Did you understand? Is that kind of a attempt at equivalency, which I have an issue with because to an extent, certain people that haven't asked themselves the more critical questions about ethnicity and identity will try to project American mores onto Brits. And it's like a case of square pegs and round holes.
mm,
Um, I think, I do think that a sense, sort of self-awareness and, just awareness of group dynamics or the lack thereof is very helpful. And, for me, I'm very passionate against, that kind of stuff because if sort of dynamics among Black people in this city, in this country, whatever, were not as at times as toxic as they are, there wouldn't really be much need to critique these classifications. But what I have seen and I've spent a long time meditating on is the reality that many Black people will perform to others about how Black they are, like virtue
mm,
signaling. But the reality is, if they're absolutely honest and they can speak off the record and their actions are very consistent with this, they don't necessarily feel a sense of loyalty or kinship with all other Black people. That's why you've constantly got people that will be talking about Africa versus the Caribbean, Nigeria versus Ghana, is it Big Island versus Small Island, what else again? Yoruba versus Igbo, blah 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 blah. And I'm not talking about Yoruba versus Igbo in Nigeria. That would be a bit more understandable. We're talking about it in the diaspora. So it begs the
mhm,
question. For me, it was it was impossible to escape the idea that someone will speak from both sides of their mouth. On the one hand, they're gonna say, "Yeah, yeah, I'm Black, bro. I love Black people. I love our people." Blah blah blah. On the other hand, they're going to go out of their way to delineate why they're so different to you and why they are entitled to ethnic chauvinism. So it's very confusing if we're really trying to be a community and help each other make sense of things. There's a litany of things that ought to be questioned, one of which is the propensity to basically differentiate yourselves from other Black people. What is the message that's being conveyed? What's the subtext? What's the use of it? And so, because, like I said, I've seen these kinds of well, let's say chasms explode in very toxic ways,
mm,
unnecessary violence and sabotage and what have you. I became passionate about it. You understand? Because it's and I've it's almost like a free for all at this point, and I don't really see why there should be a fly by night gatekeeper that gets to determine what it looks like. And there's no pushback, there's no critique, there's no contestation, there's no question on what credibility said people have. It's just presupposed. And oftentimes, when people want to force the concept of community, they need to do it through rather than actually making a compelling argument. And even if it's going to be emotive, there has to be some logic behind it too. It's just trying to badger you into submission. And that doesn't achieve much. Us as humans, we have this tendency where we tend to, if you push us in one direction, we tend to go in another direction.
mm,
And you'd think that of all of the, should I say, difference in opinion or divergence in opinion, you'd think that some of, for example, what people call the pro-wax would take initiative and realize that even if I want to make an argument, this is not the approach to take. Definition of madness, doing the same things over and over again and
mhm,
expecting different results, but they'll continue. So it begs the question: is this you know, just to use that as an example, is that rooted in love, compassion, and sincerity? Or is it getting kicks out of, you know, maybe having discourse? So like Discord. So you can now go to other people and say, I met this badger, I met this C words, you understand? You never guess what? Da, 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 da.
What do
What
you
does it
think is at the
accomplish?
root of that energy though? Because I've always tried to understand where does this lack of compassion stem from? Like, what do you think is at the root of that energy to, um, it's like an advanced form of tribalism. You know, it's just
Yeah,
almost like brutality, to be honest.
it's and I hope I'm not sort of referencing this too soon in this sort of interview, but
No,
I
it's
would put it down to the whole decentralized blackness idea.
mhm,
Um, like for example, I've done a couple of well, I don't even call it book tours, but I've been part of the Windrush 75 celebration last month. And this month I was part of the Hamster and Fulham Writers Festival, right? One thing that stood out for me was that there was plenty of women, plenty of black women, but they were like your older boomers, you know, women that were like grandchildren, like grandparents of like relatively big grandkids, right? And their sense of community, I noticed, was very different to a lot of the values that I criticize often. And so what I
mm,
realized was that back then, the community spirit, not that I'm saying it wouldn't have existed, because you always kind of form communities when you migrate to a new host society, right? But
mhm,
the need for togetherness because of the common, if you will it, opposition was what brought them together. Now that I mean, you still do have instances of racism. There's no denying that. There are, in quote, institutional elements that rear themselves. They may not be consistent,
mm,
but it didn't happen in a vacuum. And you can kind of look at the antecedents as to why certain people may, act out racism, right? But the
mm,
reality is that we're not in a day and age where there are black people that are still fighting for for equality, or like
right.
civil rights
Civil
movements.
rights.
There's no black liberation movement.
Mm,
And so what that means is that the sense of community is gone for the most part. You'll see pockets of it, there's cleavages of it, no question, but it's by and large disappeared. And as much as there's a lot of talk about black business and so on and so forth, right? That in itself is not necessarily going to create a social community where there's going to be deliberate, for example, there's going to be elders that are put in place that have to demonstrate their credentials, and people are going to listen to them, and there's going to be sort of services where there's going to be arranged marriages, and there's this whole kind of credo that's never going to come. That's just the reality. It's never going to come because it's too decentralized for that to happen. And if you did want to centralize it, what would be the incentive and the motivation for people to really converge? Besides lip service, there's a lot of lip service about, yes, we as a community need to do X, we need to do Y, we need to do Z, rinse and repeat. And this is not to condemn any one person who hasn't done anything, in quote, measurable, but it's to underline the futility of the same discussions over and over and over and over
mhm,
again. And it feels like there's a lot of like pseudo intellectual masturbation and just, going through the motions, you know.
mhm,
And this is the reason why, discussions about, around identity are important, because there isn't, outside of popular culture consumption, there isn't really, and the obvious, discrimination, la 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 la, there isn't really much that binds people that are supposedly black. There isn't really much. That's just the bottom line. There really isn't.
mm,
I've said, I mean, I wrote sort of the latter sort of, the latter part of my book, that in as much as there are people who still romanticize this idea of one monolithic black diaspora, right? Whether they like it or not, they don't all have the belief in a common fate. Now, you can look at 9 different measures of diaspora, right? I
mm.
can even quickly read them if it will be helpful.
Yeah,
Really
sure,
quickly.
if you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, sure. Yeah, by all means. So just switch to the page. Okay. So this is for people who may be the term pro-wax, who are just generally interested in, conceptual togetherness and so on and so forth. Yeah. There's 9 different areas of diaspora. Yeah. You don't have to tick every single area, but you have to tick a critical number for you to credibly consider a diaspora, right? So the first section is dispersal from an original homeland, often traumatically, to 2 or more foreign regions. That's one. Okay. So that would obviously apply to like those that were caught up in the Middle Passage. Yeah. Number 2, or see those that were sort of taken to Sierra Leone and then diverted to the Caribbean, right? So then number 2, alternatively or additionally, the expansion from homeland in search of work in pursuit of trade or to further colonial ambitions. So what I call the new diaspora is the wave of Black people that moved in the night from 1945 onward, and particularly in the last few decades, right? So those would be the ones that meet number 2. 3, a collective memory and myth about homeland, including its location, history, suffering, and achievements. Now, this is very interesting because popular culture has almost been like a surrogacy for a collective memory, but really it's a false collective memory if we're being honest with ourselves. Because even I took 4 case studies in the book here based on the regions in Africa where the majority of people were taken to the New World. Those would be the sort of the Igbos and their neighbors. We'll call them the Mokas, so that's the Efiks, the Ibibios, the Abams, etc. The Yoruba, what they call the Gold Coast Africans. So those will be people from present day Ghana, especially the Ashanti, Akana Fanti. It would be people from Benin Republic. It would be people from or some parts of Benin Republic, parts of Togo, and also Ivory Coast. And then the last part was the former Congo Kingdom, which is comprises today DR Congo, Congo Brazzaville, Angola, and Southern Gabon. So just alone, if anybody reads just the opening parts of those 4 sections, what will be evident is that there are different myths of origin. People have different names for the gods of their culture, whether it's monotheistically, whether it's sort of a pantheon or polytheistic, right? In terms of creator gods, in terms of whether it's the god of thunder, the goddess of water, however you want to look at it, right? Some, for example, believe that many of the Yoruba kings are the descendants of gods in a human form. There's so many different myths, even among certain groups. Within certain groups, there are different myths. So then how, after hundreds of years, and we fast forward to 2023, right? We've somehow kind of collapsed into just having one myth of origin. And the reality is, as much as we've created these kind of Black popular cultures and made Blackness cool in the way we understand it, right? There's no getting away from the fact that should I say, European structures labeled us as Black. And then what we did thereafter was reactionary. No matter how creative, no matter any good that has has resulted from that, it was reactionary.
Okay, great point. So, and a quick, sorry, I hate to do this because this is your time, but a quick pushback, because I know someone out there is thinking this. Someone out there is thinking, well, okay, that's true. We are very diverse, diverse histories and peoples, but in the wake of some could say slavery, and also colonialism, that to this formation of a Black collective is supposed to act as a armored, weaponry against previous encroachment, so therefore it's a time to accelerate and to think beyond our diversity, and we need to come together in order to not repeat past failings from our quote unquote ancestors. Would you see their point in any way if anyone had that mentality?
I wouldn't dismiss it because it's in the direction of discussing and considering solutions. So I wouldn't dismiss it, right? However, I'm very critically minded, as most people who have listened to me have sort of picked up on. And I'd want to identify or at least agree on measures that we can use in the name of togetherness. So this is, and there's a point within my diasporic criteria which is relevant to your question, if I may.
Yes.
Just wait, number 7, number 8.
Meanwhile, in the chat, I'm gonna post a link to Diego's book. So really go and click on the website. You need to at least, check out the website, read the description, interact with this page. So check out this link in a sec.
So one of the measures is the belief in a common fate, right? Why is that important? Even if we make assumptions for cohesive mutual love across every diasporic community you can think of, whether you want to couch it in the context of the Caribbean, Black UK, Black America, or even make it more granular, you understand, in terms of cities, regions, ends, or what have you, right? Not everybody believes that they have a common fate. Some people, for example, believe that they're better off swirling, in quotes, or interracial, not necessarily because you've built compatibility with that person, which I wish anybody well in that respect. They don't deserve any condemnation. They have to follow their convictions. But if you're doing it as some kind of form of escape or transcending, more humble racialized beginnings, the challenge with that, it wasn't really challenge per se, but the significance of that is you don't believe you have a common fate with people who have been labeled as kin, no matter how small or more in broader terms you want to put it. They don't have a common fate because their obligations to a great extent will now be facing another community where, it could be like their partner's community, that's the one that's non-black, for example. That will transform their social life, their sense of identity, and those of their children. Let's even put that to one side. Yeah, there's a lot of talk about reparations, whether that's in the Caribbean, whether it's in America. In American cases, if let's just say tomorrow an agreement is struck with the government, every Black American that is eligible, and obviously the white Americans of Black heritage, everybody that's eligible, is happy with the offer they've been made. The majority of Americans, Black Americans, sorry, would want, and rightfully so, to invest where they are in America. Even if they invested elsewhere, primarily the objective and the thought process will be to build an America. Okay. Caribbean people, right? If there was, again, reparations made available to everyone in scope and everyone was happy with the cash amount and the institutional transformations that would take place, and as much as many of them are proud of their African heritage, is there a motivation to take any resources they can acquire and go to a part of Africa en masse? No. Yeah, sure, there's a few organizations that kind of foster, or shall I say, help transition from, say, Caribbean to, like, say, Ghana, called Garib. But en masse, most Caribbean people would be content staying in the Caribbean. Now, we look at Black UK, for example, right? You have people who are 3 or 4 generations in, who are content with maybe the occasional, very occasional, more so rare out sort of trip to where their parents, grandparents, or great grandparents come from, right? But in the main, there are many people that are happy to live out their final years in the UK, be buried here, and they are, fundamentally British above all else. And then you have people that are second generation, mainly Africans, that can't comprehend growing up here, growing old, and they want to, but especially once they're touching 50 and them ages there, maybe even earlier, they want to either move back to their homeland or to a specific place they think is conducive to build a life, even if that's like a transnational thing where it's more of a linear process. They still have those. So the reality is, I know I've been very granular and broken things down into fine detail. The point is to elucidate the reality, right? That people across the so-called Black or African diaspora do not believe in a common fate. Yeah, like I said, I don't even want to call it cross purposes. I think it just literally reflects diversity, people's worldviews. There's nothing sinister about it. I don't think people should problematize the fact that people are pulling in different directions. All it underlines is that there's a great deal of diversity, heterogeneity among so-called Black people, and it's often overlooked. There's so many measures. If we look at, for example, blood types and what's the word I'm looking for here? Like propensity to sickle cell. It's mostly people from West African descent, West Central Africa to a certain extent. Those are the people. But other Black people, maybe you go to the extreme other end of the continent, maybe the Horn, for example, do not have that predisposition. So what I'm trying to say is Black people are very diverse. You understand? I think it's something that people should embrace. Even if you want to talk about loyalties here, how do people perform their roots back to their parents' homeland? One of the critical measures is Independence Day celebrations. My argument is that if people truly believed in a flat Blackness that transcended any other ethnic link elsewhere, it would not be so important to not only have Independence Day celebrations, but in some cases to even gatekeep it. I'll give you another example. Since Black people and popular culture are like this, they're like this, yeah? I'll put it to you. Coming up, say, for example, popular culture from the States, that was seen as our music. It was everybody's to partake in. That was considered Black, right? Even to a certain extent, some of the Caribbean, West Indian influence popular culture in the UK, again, that was received as everybody's. But now that Afrobeat has started to gain more traction, globalization, the customer base in this, in the UK for, artists, demanding that, you've had certain people that come from maybe certain ethnic groups, for example, that these kind of like Afrobeat songs are producing, and they want to gatekeep it. So I don't even think people realize this, the people that this applies to, but it's like other Black cultures are mine. My, in quote, Black culture is mine. It's not for the entire diaspora and the continent. So these are little things. I said this already. These are things which I don't think people realize. I just think it's literally, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's instinctive, it's visceral. I don't think they really sat down to reflect it. And so that's why it doesn't make any one person bad for having not sat down. But I think we're at a critical point where there's a lot of resources that are being put towards, Black initiatives based on the faulty assumption that all Black people have a shared consciousness. Over and above lip service, over and above being discursive and insulting other Black people for not sharing the same worldview, there are no measures where there are people that can categorically say, yes, I made this sacrifice for a swathe of Black people en masse. And there are Black people that will be literally falling from the sky saying, hey, this person basically, did this and it's impacted me like in this way or in that way. There's none of that. The closest thing was the Black Lives Matter movement. And I don't think I need to really elaborate on that, hoax, scam, whatever you want to call it, right? That flagrant 419. They are the only thing that resembles an institution that purported to do something which was in the interests of Black people en masse, right? But that wasn't the case. It weren't even necessarily for the intersectionalists who claim that, yes, this is an opportunity for us to mainstream our own agendas.
Excellent points being raised. Guys, we're 1 hour in to the stream, okay? So again, if you look at the banner below, ethnic escapism and the Black burden available on Amazon now. This is Diego Ife's book that we are breaking down and going into tonight. Okay, so check out the link. It's been posted in the chat. If mods can post the Amazon link in the chat, I'll really appreciate that. We're gonna go deeper into the book in a sec. Like the stream, please, if you enjoy these type of discussions. Very important, very cerebral. You know, we're not talking about modern women. We're not talking about the best dating strategies. Okay, this comes before all of that, right? But Diego, man, great points. And with all that being said, then do you think that the label of black is now then it's outdated? Do you think we should stop calling ourselves or referring to ourselves as black? Is that part of the problem which causes the smoke screen of or blending so many different people together? Is that the problem, the term black?
It's a good question. And I've thought about this very deeply, right? Because identity politics are as deeply rooted as they are, finding a term which would be acceptable to all black people as an alternative would probably be futile. It's not going to achieve much. What I would say, though, and what is interesting, is that there's three developments. Well, one of the developments is the increase in the mixed race population, or the other population, right? I do believe that and I'm not sure exactly how long this will take, to come into effect, but they're going to start offering, like, for example, Afro Creole and various other, because the fact they've now started asking people to list the countries they come from, there may be more of a de-emphasis on flat blackness and more of an emphasis on ethnic groups. And what's interesting about that is number 4, for one, in terms of diasporic criteria, is an idealization of the real or imagined ancestral home and a collective commitment to its maintenance, restoration, safety, and prosperity, even to its creation. Now,
that sounds like Wakanda to me. That sounds like
Thank
Wakanda.
You. This is what I'm saying.
Mythology.
The reason why I mentioned that was this, right? First and foremost, there are certain people that believe certain countries in Africa should exist and shouldn't exist. And the case for shouldn't exist is not based on it being better for them to remain as one, like say that country to remain as one, is based on some kind of ethnic zero-sum game idea where them moving away hurts you. So you'd rather certain groups be stunted in their attempt for self-determination, right? Just in order to kind of please you. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's not a consensus on that. Everybody that sends money back to Africa, whether it's Nigeria, which obviously sends the most, like no one competes with the figure they sent, whether it's Ghana, which I think is might be the second highest, whether it's Zimbabwe, Uganda, let the imagination run wild, right? These don't even go just back to the home country. They go back to the village or the local government area or municipality or borough, you understand, to solve or cater to issues on a individual level. There isn't a harnessing of remittance funds to establish diasporic communities. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what that means, in other words, is like, let's say, for example, you've had terrorist activity in southwestern Nigeria, right? And people have been displaced into the neighboring Benin Republic. There's been en masse slaughterings, destruction of crops, and so on and so forth. How many people of the so-called black diaspora are going to take a keen interest in those developments and not necessarily donate money, but even highlight awareness, even if it's a thing? Hey, have you heard about such and such? Yeah, check this out. Dun, 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 dun. Even if I don't come from that specific place, I have a vested interest in that place being stable and that place, and that place, and that place. And what it means is collectively, you have more places that are stable. But the reality is, a lot of people don't give a they don't care. It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like it's an afterthought at best. So, what I'm trying to say, I'm saying that and I'm emphasizing it to underline that there is not the imagined ancestral homeland. The closest thing you have to that is the Rastafarian movement and Wakanda, as you said. Akon City, as far as I'm concerned, is fallacy. I think it's, having looked at the research and, where the funding is going to come from, the location, the proposals. I'm not that could be for another stream entirely. But the main thing to underline is that Akon City is not something that resonates, with people from across the diaspora on a serious level. Besides, like, small talk and yada yada yada, it's not really something that resonates with them. They're not
Mm-hmm.
hustling out here trying to put a percentage of their earnings towards actualizing Akon. They don't care. By performatively speaking, they don't care. And rightfully so. So what I'm trying to say is that, and the imagined ancestral home is not even necessarily something which is even a consensus. You have some people that are hoping that Kemet is going to be resurrected. Yeah. They literally truly believe that it's something that can, happen, assuming that it's even the way that they've imagined it in their minds.
Uh-oh.
Then you got some people whose oasis is Gambia. Then you have some that, do you get my point? There's not a consistent place. Some people want to move to South Africa because it's the closest thing to Europe in Africa, and they think that that might be more conducive, and that's their prerogative. But the main point is that everybody's, should I say, oasis, nirvana, their kind of idealized place is not necessarily consistent. It
So
varies.
melanin is not enough.
Understand?
Our
Nah.
level
And
of
that's been
brownness
proven.
is not enough.
Nah, not at all. Not at all. I think even if it was, it couldn't be in isolation. It'd have to be that's when I say that's the foundation, it's a thing whereby, okay, if we all have melanin, there's a certain performance to reinforce and keep alive our identities. So what are we going to agree on? That everybody collectively across generations is willing to honor and live
Mm.
by. And the will is not there. The wherewithal, I'd even argue, isn't there either, simply because of how decentralized things are. It's very difficult to establish a consensus. Very difficult.
Mm.
Even if there was certain cities or localities in Africa which were willing to kind of like build up diasporic kind of towns, if you will, like a mini town within a town, for instance. Even if that was to happen, there'll be certain people that will feel conflicted because they still care about the village or wherever that they can trace their roots to.
Mm-hmm.
So, Africa, I don't need to say how broad it is and how diverse it is. That, I mean, it goes without saying. I don't want to insult anybody's intelligence, but that's why it's very difficult to collectivize, people's interests. And that's why I've said
Mm-hmm.
before on previous streams that just being friendly, a nod, a smile, a compliment maybe is probably the most communal thing a lot of so-called black people could do to each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the
Absolutely.
reality. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. That, we kind of laid the pavement for, discussing your book intimately. So ethnic
Mhm.
escapism and the black burden.
Mm.
What was your main motivation in creating this book and preparing this information for us,
Sure.
or your
So,
inspiration?
mhm. So I was a mature student at Birkbeck some years ago. I was doing an economics degree at the time, like a bachelor's. And coming up to my final year, there were various different modules. So I chose all the economic stuff, but there was one module that stuck out for me, and that was called The Politics of Race and Diaspora. And it was transformative because the first assignment was on the Jewish diaspora, which really kind of
Mm,
made me understand the similarities in thought processes and actions across all diasporic communities. Then, off the back of my lessons from that, I chose to do a paper on the African diaspora. Yeah, and
Mhm.
so that was, I did very well in that module. I got a first in it. So, but something told me, almost like you engage in something. It may even be like a fun fair ride or go-karting, and you start, oh, my time's up. Oh, real is it up? So I felt like I felt like my work was undone. Like I felt
Mm.
like I needed to make more of a contribution. And during the time you know, the trending topics were about black men, I mean black Americans, but black men in particular dying at the hands of police, dying in police custody, you know, executions, that type of stuff, right? There was discussions. You had white liberals that were, like the likes of Scott Wise and I forgot this woman's name now. There's this white woman, Jane Elliott, I think her name might be, who came with their own contributions to, talk up sort of like the black experience. And then there was Joy DeGroy, and I just noticed there were so many different ideas of blackness. And then what I found even more confusing to a certain extent was when the likes of like Dr. Umar would come to the UK and
Mm.
would, because he's come here several times, and he would take his American model and superimpose it onto the UK context. And because of the imprecision of blackness, people literally just took everything he said, literally verbatim, and applied it to their worldview, rather than thinking, okay, maybe there are some things that can help me make sense of my reality,
Mhm.
but it's not going to be everything.
Mhm.
But what I did was it added confusion. Stuff like the swirler movement, the this movement, feminism, this, that, da, 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 that now came in and essentially fill the cultural vacuum,
Mm.
you know, fill the cultural vacuum. So
So so I'm guessing, generally
mm,
speaking, at that point at least, you just kind of felt that the way globally, so-called black people interpretate, ethnicity as it pertains to them, you just
yeah,
felt like it hasn't really been developed, or no one's really paying
yeah,
attention to what is happening, and
mm,
people are just going on
I
autopilot, just going on with
yeah.
what they believe it is to be black,
Yeah. I thought it
right?
was very important because if you let people are making up as they go along. Most
Mm.
people haven't taken stock. I know it sounds like something which goes without saying, but recognizing that we do not live in the era of Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. If we're talking in one context, the Civil Rights Bill was passed, God knows how long. I know there was it Title 9 or something, which meant that not all of the benefits were actually got to the people it was intended for, but
Mm.
that's been passed. People don't dispute the fact it's been passed. Yeah, cool. If we're talking about the Black British Panthers, or even both sets of Black Panthers across, either side of the Atlantic, those movements have died. What's replaced them really has been feminism and the cult of celebrity, a grown preoccupation with celebrity culture, Black, mainstream, otherwise, and even across different geographies. There's literally so much to almost, what's the word I'm looking for? Immerse yourself and become, you know, really deeply rooted. But I just said this don't make sense. You can't tell me that this is in quote blackness, because when I was younger and I would say part more so of the local black community that I grew up in for the first few years of my life,
Mm.
there was a clear ethos surrounding the objectives. You understand? It was clear. It was about, when I say knowledge of self, obviously it was predominantly Caribbean. So it was more so, it covered a lot of the Caribbean, but there was some elements of sort of like African celebrations. There used to be barbecues, Saturday schools. There are different types of events that used to take place. I know very sort of incipient, but those events did take place.
Mhm.
And then that's given way. And I got reason why I mention all this stuff, because these are things that are going through my mind during that assignment, that second
Right.
assignment, and after it. And I said, I need to make a contribution here, man, because I'm sick of different people projecting their idea of blackness. You'll have somebody that will say that, oh, because you don't virtue signal to the roadman every so often. Like they're saying, okay, I've heard some dumb stuff. I've heard people say, be articulate, but every so often, every other sentence say, yeah, get me in it. So they want me to do that.
That's
So it's almost
crazy.
like peekaboo, yeah, I'm hood, I'm about that life.
Mm.
Virtue signaling, you understand? So you'd have people that would want me to do that. Then you'd have, for example, certain women, for instance, that would think that, you know, as a black man, you can only be, that's if you grew up here or in the West, you can only be one way. Unless you're a fresh uncle, you can only be one way. And when I say fresh, I'm really saying that as ease of reference, not
Mhm.
to denigrate anybody that grew up outside the UK and later moved here. And then
Mhm.
I looked at it and I was like, hang on a second. What is it that people all agree on? And then I said, okay, popular culture. But then the problem with that is not every black person has time to keep up with what's going on in the celebrity world. Some people have ish to do. They have things that are far more pressing. So that means that it's almost like their blackness, they need to do catch up. They're in deficit or blackness overdraft. They need to get back into the black on a
Right.
cultural and ethno-cultural level. That's the way that people speak. But the reality is, it all points to imprecision. So I said, I need to come up with a framework so that even though there's going to be a lot of conjecture, people are going to come out with their strange ideas. At least, if all is said and done, certain people want to settle debates or arguments, that I've actually been able to put something in, you know,
You've
put
pushed the
something in.
needle, man, and that's
Yeah,
awesome. You
basically.
know.
And that was the goal. And it was a very hard one because I sacrificed employment. I took time out from work. You know,
Mm.
there were several times where I thought I was done. Then you're like, oh, ish, I need to. And obviously, when you're self-published as well, your book has to resemble as much as possible any other book on the market, but you have to also have a competitive edge. And it took a lot out of me, which is why I haven't uploaded content on YouTube for months, but that's going to change over the coming weeks. But it was all consuming. And so I won't lie to you, sometimes when I find myself in certain spaces where I split opinion because of some of my views, it was a little discouraging, just
Mm.
because I thought, you mean to tell me you've managed to sidestep every other thing that you could identify as positive and net value additive and focus on some subjectivities. And then because there are other people that may have certain levels of insecurities, you're now playing on their sensibilities. So before you know it, said people become like the spokesman for the coalition of losers. And
Mhm.
I'm probably saying the obvious here. I'm sure that as much as you can't control who your viewers are, it's you don't necessarily want losers. You wouldn't choose
Absolutely,
given
absolutely.
the opportunity. Yeah. So it would be like you have people that kind of mindset that would
Mhm.
want to sabotage and derail these discussions, but they will have the over familiarity, not just because of the anonymity of the internet, but because they think they're in a black safe space. So that this I can be toxic to this black person. There's going to be no cost for it. I'm not going to be ostracized or told where to go. People are just going to shrug their shoulders or heck, even support the toxicity and dysfunction I'm putting out there.
Mhm.
But I said that the mission was greater than to be discouraged. And so it wasn't something that really killed my momentum, but it just gave me room for, food for thought. And in the course of that, I realized that this is why conceptually decentralized blackness is important to recognize. I would argue performatively, people have already been acting like it's decentralized. The fact that
Mm.
people make it up as they go along, but really trying to understand that no one can take away you, in quote, being black. They can't take away your melanin. If there's certain music genres and media creation out there that's interesting, that is produced by black people and features black people, by all means enjoy it. If there's certain peculiarities you have that are synonymous with blackness, do not let yourself be dissuaded. But it was more so
For
a
the
case.
sorry,
No,
sorry to cut you. For the uninitiated, when you say decentralized blackness, what are you saying? What does that mean?
so when I say blackness, what it means is that there's no gatekeeper. There's no global headquarters of blackness or even diasporic headquarters of blackness where there's a nominated body, you have a set of permanent secretaries, you have various different programs, initiatives, other institutions educationally, finance companies, whatever. Let the imagination run wild. There's nothing like that exists. So blackness is it never was centralized. because it was all about liberation and resistance politics. But in
Mm.
this present day and age, given that even what Black popular culture looked like has not remained static, it's changed decade on decade, year on year, season on season. It has changed. You get what I'm saying? Like, what, say, for example, our parents may have listened to in terms of Black artists back in the late 80s, early 90s, whether it's Sade, whether it was, and this is of no particular order, mind you, yeah, whether it was Sade, whether it was, or Sade, I should say, whether it was, you know, is it Shabba Ranks, who,
Mm.
whatever it was, yeah, their take on Black popular culture, New Jack City, is different to what maybe, for example, Gen Z, what might resonate with them, which would be, you know, maybe drill music, maybe certain kind of sort of TV series on Netflix, for example. So what's received as popular culture varies depending on the generation. That adds to the imprecision as well.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
understand? Because I think if people really want to understand people's idea or ideation on blackness, you have to speak to different generations that are part of the so-called, or fictive, as I call it, Black community.
For sure.
Um, and you have to speak to people different areas, because there's not going to be a consistency. You'll
Mm-hmm.
start to see how, you know, the vagaries of perceived blackness that exists. But essentially, decentralized blackness means that no one can literally call you the COON word or the badger or whatever. They cannot call your blackness into question because you do not fulfill the stereotypes which they have wedded themselves to that you should. So as long as you're not going out of your way systematically to portray Black people or Black men or whatever in a negative light, right? You're not putting resources to it, or going out of your way to sabotage other Black people, whether it's mean mugging, whether it's whatever it is. Outside of that, I don't think any Black person has any business telling another Black person that the music you listen to is problematic, your mode of speech is problematic, how you dress is problematic. What
Speaking
you
on
know,
that, this is why I make it a key point. You know, whenever I see Black men trying to sell other Black men, why are you doing that? When I hear people say, oh, Black men are only admired because of BBC and because of all these other traits, why are you saying that? You know, why are you um, showcasing, why do you have those negative thoughts in the first place? Where is it coming from? Why is it there? You know, so the moment I see that level of kind of self-degradation, man, I make an effort to kind of sweep that to the side, because that is just, it doesn't do anything for us as a group. um yeah, and like, absolutely, man, absolutely. Let me bring up this super chat from
yeah,
Uchiha
sure.
Strider again.
Mhm.
Really appreciate that, bro. Let me give you that gunshot. A bit late. Ooh, I really need to update these sounds, but bear with me. He says, Strider with a £4.99 super chat. Really appreciate that. He says, I myself am guilty of some of these flaws. Diego, did you adopt any coping strategies to relieve yourself of adhering to these stereotypes? That's a great question. If
Yeah,
you
it's a
did.
good question, man. So I would say the thing about the strategies. So obviously, coming up as a kid, I used to speak really fast. I used to speak a lot in what people would call, I call it London Creole English, or LCE. Others may call it multicultural London English, or slang, or informal speech. I was accustomed to speaking that way, right? But then when I now started trying to make money and organizing parties and speaking to people that were older, then I made sure that I obviously, in quote, we call code switch, and
Mm,
I focused on speaking English that I believed could be understood as best as possible. And then gradually things happened. I started to, make my wardrobe more sophisticated. I started to wear suits, and if it weren't suits, then it would be like, smart casual, maybe like a suit jacket, shirt, maybe jeans or trousers, like chinos, for example. And what now happened was I transcended what people, no, very few people could really come and tell me that, oh, you're not Black enough. Some people did. of course, because of, like I said, mode of speech. But all I did was I just said to myself, like, as long as I can justify these decisions based on rationale and logic, then no problem. And I started asking questions. This is like probably like late teens, and I started asking people, I'm like, if we're in quote keeping it real, does that mean we deserve to be more hungry in a literal sense than other groups? Is that what you're insinuating? And then they'll start beatboxing, turn into bumbling idiots on the spot. Just like what I'm saying. And that's because it's like, okay, so wait, are you telling me that by me immersing myself in understanding the world of finance, how business works and stuff, and even discussing it with other black people who are remotely interested, does that really make me a sellout? Really? Really? So I'm out here trying to basically help other people get access to funding, jobs, whatever. But some way, somehow, I'm supposed to be a sellout.
Hey,
You see that
great.
kind of like debased way of reasoning. So my coping strategies was just, I'm a strong-headed person. Like you understand what I'm trying to say? If I really
Absolutely
believe in
necessary.
something, I can be
Absolutely.
stubborn as hell. And it's been like that since I was a child. So everyone's had to contend with peer pressure, and you kind of take each moment of temptation as it comes. But insofar as standing on my square, I don't know if it was visceral, I don't know if it's instinctive. Even what I'm saying now is not to boast, it's just matter of fact. I'd be unapologetic. So that, I guess, was my coping strategy. Doubling down. Yeah.
Great answer, man. A great question, Uchiha Strider, man. I really appreciate your support as well. Great question. Guys, if you're enjoying the stream, this is a spectacular stream, man. Diego, just has a way with words, very articulate, very expressive, hits home, so please do support, like the stream. Again, check out the link to the Amazon page for the book. We're still discussing the book. Okay, let me quickly paste and check so you have no excuse but to click on the link, open up the tab, read the description, and consider buying this for the information, for the stuff that we're talking about today. Okay, very important. And of course, underneath the video in the description, check out Diego Ife's channel as well. Subscribe if you haven't. Show any form of support is very much appreciated. But Diego, you mentioned the time, in terms of the effort of creating the book and also the process of delivering the book. How long would you say in total the book took to be published?
So I started it in 2016, like summer 2016. From summer 2016 to about say September 2018, I would write, talk myself out of doing it, write, talk myself out of doing it. So I literally was vacillating one end to another. And then something just told me in late September 2018 to, really be purposeful. So I now started reading like extensively. It's not like I wasn't a reader to begin with, but I started going deep, started reading all different pages of Wikipedia, started looking at the academic journals and books it was referencing. I started going to certain conferences. I started I really threw myself into it. And then the bulk of like the writing that people would read now, I started that in about 2019. So I've written, put it like this, right? You probably laugh at this, but I've written a lot. Like for me, I've got, okay, this book as it is has 440 something odd pages, right? It's not as much as it may sound because of the different types of information that are covered, or that is covered, I should say. But I wrote far more than what I actually published.
Right.
If I
Is
literally
that normal
published,
though? Is that I would think that's normal to edit and to give out your
it,
truth thought, right? Is that
it,
not a normal process to over deliver and then to kind of
it's normal, but I had too much content. You understand? So that's why I had to create volume 2, because with volume 1, when I've spoken about the different ethnic groups, I covered just enough context for people to understand their new world ways of life, right? But the issues, Africa's problems when it comes down to, African history, the onset of Africa being catapulted into the global economy as we know it today, all that kind of stuff, right? It was too much information to fit in. Then I've done a critique on Kwame Nkrumah's neo-colonialism and its viability from the point of which he published his book in 1965 up until the world, especially Africa as we know it in 2023. I wrote too much. Do you understand?
Mhm.
Even with volume 2 right now, I'm still trying to find ways to just kind of shoehorn it where it's not too much information. So, and I've written far more than that. You understand? I've written a lot. And the problem is that it was almost like, okay, I have this framework and then I can research in this direction and that direction and boom, 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 boom. But I've never read so much in my life, man. And so, yeah, in terms of managing to really put the most compelling content to make sure that the book gets the messages across that I want to be sort of like, conveyed, could not get it lower than 443 pages. Yeah.
Is the process in general easy, would you say? Or if you can talk us through the process maybe in terms of getting your writing to be published? Like, what is it like? Is it first creative ideas, creative writing, then you start to format it, and then how is that process, and is it easy?
So essentially, you start out with what it is that you want. That can just literally be as much as a sentence. Then you now start looking at the topic matter. You start looking at other topic matter which is related that you can find a way to weave in. And then you go about reading. You now start having titles. At least you'll have placeholder titles or section headings, right? You can now treat them, for anyone that's done anything from A-level upward, written essays or at least attempted to write essays. You now start to basically use those as a way to create essays in a sense. Then you now start finding ways, almost like a kind of solving a jigsaw puzzle, right? Those different essays you now start to find ways to mesh them. Then what now happens is, as you're writing, sometimes the title you get better ideas for your titles, right? That you're going to use. So what now happens is you now make sure that the content that you've written under that title would still be fitting with the new title. Then with any book, I mean, you've got different books have different objectives. With mine, I wanted to condense a lot of fact, but it had to be critical. There had to be analysis in there. Try to make it as intelligible as possible, but I had to put analysis in there because of it being quite a critical topic. But other books, for example, might just be a compilation of this happened, that happened, that happened, this happened. And so it's really about making sure that what you set out to start with is consistent with what's being produced. The only thing, though, of course, is that sometimes you might decide that you want to shorten a book. So you now start identifying the key bits. It will take a little bit of time to think. You might have to think, go away, come back, think some more. But ultimately, you're invested in yourself. That's the way one has to look at it. And before you know it, things start to basically just kind of congeal. Before you know it, you've got a book. Obviously, I made sure that I studied various different books, making sure my page numbers were where they should be. My what do you call it? My, for example, what's the word I'm looking for? Like contents page. Your standard kind of book convention, all that kind of stuff, your glossary of terms and yada 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 yada. And then I now just gradually started to compare the book with the books I have in my book collection. I got a large one, as I've made no secret about. And I'm like, yeah, this book seems to kind of, outside of obviously my goals of writing it, the way it's structured and presented doesn't look really any different to any other book on the market. So it did require a lot of like research. There are going to be moments of frustration. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. So you almost have to find a way to fail forward. And failing forward is relative, because what that means, in other words, is that the initial draft or drafts are not going to be perfect. But the more it's refined, even if you spend half an hour here, 15 minutes there, the more it's refined, the better the product. And then it makes it easier to sell the idea. Because after you've done all of the work about pushing it out, talking about, what really makes it what it is, right? It's important that the book at least matches up or even transcends what you covered when you talk about it. And sometimes you have people that can write a good book, but the way in which it's promoted, or shall I say, in terms of its publicization or what have you, isn't the greatest in execution. There's other people that write books that are pretty mediocre at best, but it has some value and it's been promoted well. And sometimes people start to adopt the opinions of other people, even if it may not necessarily be an accurate reflection. So it's almost like finding a way to, like an equilibrium, trying to find a way to strike the best balance possible. And even if on a scale of like 1 to 10, you reach maybe 8 out of 10, like 7, 8, 9, you're in good company.
Yeah. That your description sounds like a lot of the self-help books out there. It's like, is this correct? Is that right? But hey, some people get drawn to it because people have promoted it. Oh yeah, this book is the one. Yeah, it might be BS, but people still kind of get drawn to it. So
yeah,
very much understand that. Let me quickly shout out JM Talks in the building with the £5 super chat, man. I appreciate you, JM Talks. As you all should know, another fellow UK content creator. Check out his channel, most definitely. He says for the badgery. So if you guys don't know, we formulated the UK version of what they call a raccoon, over in the States. The badger symbolizes, at least in design, our equivalent. So that's what he means by badgery, but obviously we're just playing around, kind of laughing at the whole idea of someone being a raccoon, right? Because of who they are. And again, we're talking about decentralized blackness, right? Who determines what blackness is, right? Basically, who determines who you are as a person, right? This is information that we all really need to have on lock, right? We need to stop and think. Again, with being on autopilot, doing things while we're doing this. Is it because the group said we should, right? It's in line with that for me. But salute to JM Talk channel. I know it might sound like we've pretty much spoken about the book throughout the whole stream, but I want you to kind of summarize it if you can. Firstly, what is the book about, in your opinion? What is ethnic escapism and the Black burden about?
Great question. So I look at the evolution of ethnicity and identity as we know it, right? Obviously for me to really shed light on it in the present day sort of setting, I've got to take it back to the roots. So what I wanted to show was a few things. I wanted to show, I guess Black people and those that are interested in this topic, that identity is fluid. And that whether you want to talk about the different nations, empires, polities in Africa that people were extracted from and taken to the New World, right? There's things which they obviously carried with them, which now, contributed to that creolization process, which was unique and peculiar to different islands, if we use the Caribbean as an example. So I really wanted to contour how those cultures were created. I wanted to humanize the Africans that were caught up. I wanted to speak about their spiritual belief systems, their ways of life, really wanted to shed light on that. Because even in terms of modern day popular culture, some of the musical elements, all that stuff has its roots in the old world. Of course it has its roots, but I wanted to really contour, what that looked like, I wanted to educate in terms of covering some of the key developments because, for example, there's a lot of talk about, you Africans sold other Africans. And that in itself is a problematic narrative. It's a narrative which is like endemic, is very, ubiquitous across the internet. But it's not strictly speaking true, because it's almost like, for instance, and I covered the reparations topic in terms of what's happened, the history, recent history up until the present day, because again, it's an important topic. But yeah, when it comes down to this notion of Africans selling Africans, I just thought it was important that, there was context, because it's almost as if when it comes to almost indicting somebody or a group of people, there has to be the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise. But when it comes to indicting Africans en masse, it's guilt until possibly given the opportunity to prove otherwise. And many have a lot to say about the institutions that do that to Black people, and most particularly to Black men in the diaspora. So why is it okay? Why is it not okay in certain contexts, but it's okay in others? It's an egregious double standard, So I really wanted to make sure I could shed light on that, because I think the context is important. And I searched far, high, and wide to see if there was any other publication that even so much as done it, just made a dent in what I'm talking about. Very critical subtopic, and there's nothing, which emboldened me and motivated me even more to make sure that I covered it in the book, right? I wanted to talk about the journey to freedom. So even, for example, about the spiritual belief systems and what have you, thought it was important that people knew about the onset of Christianity among diasporans, because there's a lot of conjecture and speculation on that. Even how, for example, there was a common denominator between like the likes of, say, Sam Sharp, who led the Jamaican revolt, or the likes of Nat Turner in the US. They both were Baptists. So there was something about it that basically gave that level of conviction that the Black man deserved to be free. What lessons can be derived from that? You understand? Even the ways that families were created, for example. At what point did one man, one woman conceptually take root in the diaspora, because it wasn't as uniform in the old world? So I really wanted to make sure that it was a timeline, a chronology, pretty much up to the present day. Like I said, the transition for freedom, the abolition movement, dispelling certain notions and narratives about it, and then looking at critical events in the 20th century, especially in the age of the sort of Black, shall I say, liberation politics, Pan-African congresses, for example, why Pan-Africanism was considered, a solution, the differences or divergence in opinion and ideology behind it, because at the end of the day, if we're going to talk about diasporic consciousness, right, can the Pan-African congresses and collaboration in the first half of the 20th century be demonstrable or indicative of a consciousness shared across the diaspora? To a certain extent, it applied in academic circles, but en masse, it depended on what information you had access to, and there wasn't necessarily a consistency of awareness behind that. So it's very difficult to even contour or estimate how much people felt like they were similar. I do know that certain liberation messages resonated, reverberated even across the black, the Black world. But from, I thought it was really important so that people can understand its roots and what have you. And then ultimately taking them on that journey, there's a lot of discussions and conjecture on, the Black people in the UK is contracting in size, it's problematic, blah, 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 blah. And I felt that the narrative was simplistic at best and very inaccurate, for the most part. I thought, again, context was needed. Like, for example, I've spoken about how Black people in the UK have, up until obviously these last few decades, have really not been an enduring presence in mainstream life. You know, it's either one of a few outcomes would actually transpire. One, they would end up going back to Africa, even if it may not be specifically where they have roots. They will end up procreating and marrying, you know, someone from the mainstream population. Three, they'll die off without procreating. Those are the common fates in this country. And I'd even argue that the black presence did not constitute a diaspora before. I think what you have now has been an attempt at making sense of identity. And back in the 20th century, especially the second half of the 20th century, the common narrative across the diaspora and even parts of the continent was we need to overcome capitalism. Capitalism is a danger, endangers black people, and is also inequitable for swathes of the population. That was the focus. But like I said, now that that's dissipated, it really now comes back to this anything, everything, and nothing sort of set of circumstances that we currently have. Yeah.
Hey, great answer. Great answer.
Yeah.
Bro, let me quickly shout out Blaze in the building. Blaze in the building. We got our apparently African Americans, I'm sure. In the building, Blaze with a $20 super chat. All he's saying is salute, bros, man. I really appreciate that for coming through, listening in, and you know, taking heed and also showing support, man. Salute to Blaze in the building. I really appreciate you, bro. Always coming through. I just want to ask you, bro, Diego. Towards the end, are you okay with like a Q&A? Like if people in the chat want to pose questions to you about the book or about anything, are you all right with that?
Yeah, no problem at all.
Perfect. Okay, so we understand, you know, what the book is about, and one thing that I noticed, again, I haven't completed the book. My bad. Like, I've got so many. I've got so many books that I need to get through. I'm not a great reader. I'm not as good as I need to be. You know, a lot of the times I'm on audio books, but what I noticed was that already from where I was, the depth of knowledge, it's different from what we will find in other so-called mainstream books. You know, it's you can tell that there was a lot of love and there's a lot of attention emphasized with regards to what you're trying to express or explain or describe. So I basically want to ask, how did you come across the information? Like, how in depth did you have to research to find the information that you have? Because a lot of it seems like very I would assume it's hard to find. And was it hard to find?
Yeah, no,
the research, the extensive research?
It definitely was, because it was, the scope was not necessarily static. It kind of evolved, it changed. It was almost like as I was producing it, I started to see flaws that were arising, and then I needed to find a way to address those flaws. So it now starts to be a thing of, what are the most pressing questions that the diaspora has? And it's all good and well me having my personal opinions, no matter how well considered they are, right? But it's imperative for other people to kind of see the cogency of my message and what I'm putting out there. And even if they're not going to agree, which is then entirely their prerogative, they have the wherewithal, the resources, right, in order to make an alternatively considered decision. You know, yeah, that was definitely a priority of mine. Definitely. Putting it together, I think initially, obviously, I've spoken about the middle passage, and that was probably one of the first few things I wrote in the book. But I said, you know what, yeah, I need to give more context about how these people identified, and how in many ways some of the ethnicities as we know them in Africa today, the way they've evolved is as a function of shall I say, the experiences in the new world that certain people had.
Mm.
You know, I thought it would call ethnogenesis, which is, like I said, the makings and the foundations of an ethnic group. What does that look like? I thought was very important, because there's some people, for example, that might have done 23andMe test or an ancestry test, and if they look at their ethnic makeup on that test, irrespective of if there's maybe some subtle changes, they can get information in this book that will satisfy practically all the questions or any question they could have about the culture that their ancestors practiced, or cultures, let me pluralize it, that their ancestors practiced. I really wanted to make, because it's about humanizing them. You know, I wanted to also account for the fact that I think there was a study done by PBS, I think it's PBS, one of these American TV programs, where they done a sample of Black Americans and found a disproportionate amount of Nigerian DNA. And the only way that that could be explained was through the intercolonial slave trade, which I dedicated a small section to my book so that people could understand the context. I wanted people to understand why certain personalities were favored over others. You know, so certain people being very rebellious, for example, others being more passive. You know, certain people can see that they had ancestors that had different personalities. And if they were, broadly speaking, Africans, they were quite diverse people. I wanted to make sure that they had that richness, you know. And then, of course, like the cultures, for instance, because there are some people that, you know, they have a considerable exposure to, you know, maybe if we're talking about Caribbean, someone with Caribbean roots, they may have a, you know, considerable exposure to the Caribbean culture from that particular island, but understanding where certain things come from. So, for example, if you go up country in Jamaica, you'll find grandmothers will give their children and their grandchildren, if they're sick, cola nut tea. Now that's a crossover from the Igbos, you know, that went to Jamaica. But as far as they're aware, this is a Jamaican practice, and it now is, yes. But understanding, for example, where these practices went from. Patois, for example, and certain Creoles, seeing the contributions from different African languages. So it's almost kind of like fitting like a jig, like I looked at it like a puzzle to a certain extent. And that's certainly how it felt for a good chunk of writing the book. But bit by bit, I found all of the jigsaws, you know, the jigsaw pieces, if you will.
Right.
And the book is effectively the culmination of completing, you know, a jigsaw puzzle, you know. And there are some people that might believe, or they might interpret what I'm saying as being cocksure or being arrogant. But what I would say is to maybe transpose that way of looking at things and consider the positives. Maybe this is about conviction. And if I'm so invested in believing that what he's saying sounds hubristic, I can only invite you to put your money where your mouth is, be fully armed with the content, and then thereafter maybe have a second opinion. And I can say categorically, it will be money well spent. And more crucially, time spent very well. And at the end of the day, if 7 years of activity, sacrificing income from my main job, and all the literally tanking my social life and everything else I've done, right? The sense of conviction is not something that's willy-nilly. It is, we're talking about well over half a decade of work. I didn't have any gray hairs before. None. I got gray hairs, man. This is I think some of them are probably premature as well, you know, but
same
you
here,
know.
man.
But yeah, look, a lot of sweat equity went into it, to be honest. So, yeah.
Hey, well said, man. I'm very, to be honest, man, I'm really happy for you, man. It's really good to see this type of progress. Like you said, you know, people can have their own opinion, whether it's based on fallacy or some fact. That's beside the point. It's more so that someone is able to create something with this level of depth. You know, so a piece of information that you can digest that isn't, you know, that isn't from a source that is not so-called native, right? It's from an external type of source, right? That's what gets me, and that's what I'm impressed by. And yeah, your dedication, you know, in many streams you've constantly cited your writing. So for me, it's good to see, man. I like to see people progress to the next level, complete their tasks, you know. So I'm really happy for what you've done. My kind of final question before before we go to the Q&A, if anyone has questions for Diego about the book, about his views on, you know, ethnicity or anything in general, feel free to put them in the chat. And then I'm going to read out some of the last few super chats. I really do appreciate you. But this might sound like a kind of a simpleton's question, but then who is this book for, in your opinion? You know, who is this book for? Could it be for a so-called Black American who might have similar kind of conundrums in their state of existence, or is it particularly for the so-called Black British person who is in such a position where they are like almost like a minority within a minority, if that makes sense, like so divided, right? Or could it be for even other ethnic groups who are in a similar situation and they're trying to you know, find themselves and understand where they are placed in certain situations? Like, who is this book for, in your opinion?
Interestingly enough, every single group you listed in terms of the question, they will derive value from reading this book, right? The people, and this is why I call them the prototype for the Black identity in the Western world. Of the people that have the most confidence on the topic, even if they may be misinformed or they are informed, irrespective of how informed they are, Black Americans, they are in a stratosphere of their own in terms of the confidence, right? I think to a certain extent, a lot of Black Brits take their cues from them, which is why, of course, Hebrew Israelites as a dogma has transcended there over here, and certain developments have happened as a result of that, certain belief systems and what have you. So I believe that if that influence by and large remains constant, which it appears it's going to, this book by extension will be definitely relevant, especially with the new diaspora section, which I contour, you know, a lot, because obviously there's parts of it which is vis-a-vis. So I will say, for example, where I cover Black business rates, I cover Black business rates in the US and the UK. I speak about some of the achievements. I look at some of the bottlenecks when it comes down to health, the health, state of health, access to medical care. I cover both sides. You understand? When it comes to myth and folklore, I cover both sides. When it comes to popular culture and its indivisibility from Black identity formation, I cover both sides of the Atlantic. So even any people Caribbean roots, whether they're in the US, whether in the UK, whether they're on the islands themselves, will derive value. I think for many Africans as well, who have been influenced, their sense of identity is pretty much copy paste from the Western world, you know, in terms of like the flows of globalization. They do well to understand the, you know, contouring, you know, Blackness from their own perspective, and realizing that certain music, Real Housewives of this, such and such and such, should not necessarily be where you take your cues from how to look at the world. That's just the reality of it. So, and then again, you've got a lot of non-Black people. So if you're the white person within a swirler setting and you truly want to be able to impart knowledge to your mixed race offspring, give them a sense of self, you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong. Very few people are going to have all of the answers, but the bottom line is, if they want an understanding of self, both in terms of their more recent Caribbean roots and their more distant African roots, they would be hard pressed to find it officially documented in any other source. I speak with the utmost confidence in saying that. You understand? For example, it could be Asian Caribbean people who want to understand more about the Black diasporic trajectory. They'd benefit. People that are into the social sciences, whether you're a sociologist, whether you write about diaspora, whether you talk about globalization, let the imagination run wild. You cannot go wrong by looking at this book. There's a lot in it for different types of people, to be honest. And if you're somebody that just wants a book recommendation that is along the lines of something you wouldn't ordinarily plump to look for, you cannot go wrong. Almost like a wild card selection. This is the wild card.
Excellently put, brother Diego Ife in the building. Please, this is now, we can go into a Q&A. You know, if you got any questions for Diego about the book, about his views on, you know, life, or, you know, being the kind of Black British situation, please feel free to post in. You know, I know some people might prefer a call-in, but I really want this stream to be dedicated to Diego, you know, himself. So I don't really want it to be like a discussion where, you know, with the time it will be, the length of the stream might put people off from viewing. So I really want it to be in this format, but please do put your questions in the chat. But shout out to Diva. I don't know why I didn't ask Diego, man. I apologize. Diva made it clear that you have your website, which I remember you posting a long time ago.
Yeah.
She says buy it from the website instead. So the website link is in the chat. Salute to Diva for the support. The website link is in the chat. Go to diegoife.com, and there you can buy the book directly. So fully support. You know, Amazon or whatever is not getting a cut. So buy directly from Diego's website. That's a good shout. We've got a few super chats to get through. We got Kings and Queens in the building, man. Salute to Kings and Queens, another content creator from the UK. So salute to Kings and Queens in the building. He with the £5 super chat. I really do appreciate that. I appreciate you. He says, great discussion. Where can we buy the book? Well put. The book can be found on diegoife.com. Check out his website, and there he has a panel for books and every other service he might be offering, you know, but go to his site, diegoife.com. You can purchase the book directly from there. Okay, but
the site is the preferred option. If I know some people are a bit funny, you know, Amazon gives them confidence. So either or, my preference is the site. I can give you a free copy, and obviously my royalties will be higher if you're buying it directly from me. And
absolutely,
sold quite a lot of copies. I've taken delivery of a recent batch, so ready to dispatch as soon as people, you know, made their payments.
True. Yeah, absolutely. So check out Diego Ife's website. Salute to Kings and Queens in the building. We got Jessica X in the building. Salute to you. It's been a minute. Where's your gunshot salute? Salute to Jessica X in the building. Of course, a very well-known UK content creator too. It's been a minute. Good to have you in the building. She just comes through showing praises. You know, I hope you appreciated the conversation, you know, and Diego's information, extensive. But Jessica X, good to have you in the building. Appreciate your support, as always. We got Uchiha Strider in the building, and I kept this super chat for last because it's probably one of those super chats that, you know, it's more so a question in line with the Q&A, which is good. So I appreciate you, Strider, for the consistent support. You sponsored this show, man. So really do appreciate you. Really do appreciate that. With the $4.99 super chat, he says, Diego, do you have any insight on the children of Israel being the majority of the slave trade? So yes. No, so I kind of think that this might be probably controversial because it kind of alludes to the whole idea of, you know, Hebrew Israelite ideology, I'm guessing, and the belief of being the lost tribe, right? So I guess generally, what's your view on that and that type of lineage?
So the thing about the Hebrew Israelite kind of movement, and this is just my opinion, so make of it what you will. before like your Alex Haley, the Roots, and popular culture started to give cues as to identity and potential ancestral lineage, obviously you had your trying to get your civil, equity, right, within society. Now, when it became a thing of who are we, and I'll say from the 1970s onward, where the question became ever, asked more frequently, right? There was different ideas that started to emerge. Some people were, receptive to Islam because it seemed as if it was countercultural and it was seen as something that was more of a black man's religion than, say, Christianity. So you had that, for example. You had people that Nation of Islam. You had people that is it Planet Narubia and what other the
Mm.
5%ers, and I can go on. Some people went into like, is it Ifa, Obatala, so on and so forth. Yeah. So I look at Hebrew Israelite dogma as one of those that came out of that milieu, came out of that era. That's how I look at it. When it comes down to, and this is, you can look at it in different ways. The closest way I can answer this question, I'm not sure if anybody in the chat or you, Falcon, is familiar with the Reconquista, the Catholic conquest of Spain, which deposed or supplanted the Moorish Spain, right?
The Inquisition, right? The Spanish, is that it?
The Reconquista,
Different.
yeah, Reconquest, yeah.
Oh, right. Sounds
So
different.
huh?
No, I
So from
haven't
like the
heard of that.
15th to the 17th century, Muslims, or shall I say Moorish, so black Spaniards, however you want to just label them, they started to be expelled or would move or be killed. And then the Jews, the black and mixed, well, what people would call, what would say resembles mulatto Jews, they were on good terms with the Moorish or the Muslims, but they both basically had to leave. So some of those black and, should I say, tanned, if you will, Jews started to go further. They went to Africa. Some of them went to Algeria. Some went to Morocco. Some went further south. Ended up going to places like Senegal, St. Thomas. Some started going to what we now know as southeast/eastern Nigeria. Some ended up in Uganda, right? They were not Jews in the sense of like your rabbinic Jews, where you would have like certain kind of stylization and like attire per se. It was more so the practices, like the market days you'd observe, circumcision, that period of time when a woman has a child and the mother-in-law would come and help the mother bed into life as a, do you understand? Those were the practices. They call them Judaic practices that many people from that region or those regions were basically exposed to. So then what now happened is the offspring of many of those people were actually enslaved in the New World. So some of those practices or ideas went across the Atlantic. But I have to emphasize they were Judaic practices and, so shall I say, philosophies, as opposed to, say, Judaism or anything like that. The thing about the whole lost tribes kind of ideation, like I said, it's more so theory. It's a bit like people that have bought into the idea that black people all come from Egypt and there's some kind of expulsion out of Egypt where Egypt was like the core and all these other places within Africa and beyond was where people centrifugally poured out into, and there's no evidence for it. You understand?
Don't break our hearts, man.
It's not compelling enough. And I look, I recognize that in the course of trying to find some type of conclusion about who one is and all that other stuff, it's only natural that people will buy into certain narratives. A lot of these narratives, if you look at them, in many cases, right, is about the feel good factor. It's about having a sense of self, and an enhanced kind of self-esteem, if we will, as it pertains to like racial identity. That's what it was all motivated by. is the very idea, for example, you're my queen, you're my king. Hey, yeah, king, king, king. All this kind of talk that you'll find is very common in many black spaces. That stuff, term of endearment, you're not going to find me knocking it. But the reality is, if everybody is a king or queen, and there's some people that truly believe that we were all these regal people, right? The ones of us that were exported to the new world. If we're all kings and queens, then nobody's a king or queen. Do you understand? Or even like the measure of, using empire as a measure of how civilized a group can be is also problematic for black people to necessarily kind of, go out of their way to try to fulfill, because it's not the measure they created. It's the measure that was created by the European writers and academics and scholars that a lot of black people complain portrayed us in a negative light or in a racist light. Do you see what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to get at is, remember there was a point in the book where I spoke about myth and folklore.
Yeah.
That's what it relates to. So the whole kind of idea of being one of the lost tribes is myth and folklore. Certain groups, in the quest to eke out their own identity separate from the ones they believe they've been given, have adopted their own new and exclusive myths of origin and folklore. But why is it that their directly traceable ancestors believed in certain indigenous gods, deities, entities, but somehow, so was it that they were lost in the old world as well? No, I mean, it's not like, it's literally just a question that's out there. It's one of those questions to someone to ponder on. But it doesn't make sense how you got people that can identify maybe 6 regions in Africa, mostly West Africa, right? That they had ancestors that were taken from, many of whom are in certain like archives. Their information has been recorded in certain archives, documentation, photos, etc. But some way, somehow, there's some kind of link to lost tribes that predates. Do you see? Ultimately, I'm not convinced by the ideation behind it, but you're not going to find me necessarily telling people that they believe in complete nonsense. If that's the sum of their convictions, more power to you. That's it.
Hey, Uchiha Strider, hope that answers your question. Great question. And, we can always expand on that, on those ideas. But I hope that answers that. Great insight from Diego. Another question from brother KB Jones in the building. He says, question for Diego. Where do you see the direction of the quote-unquote Black British community population in, say, 10 years' time as Gen Z come of age?
There's definitely going to be more assimilation. So assimilation on a cultural level, assimilation among Black people is already very deep, deeper than a lot of people want to actually acknowledge. It's a bit of an uncomfortable one because, again, it's a Pandora's box. Okay, so where do we go from here? But your average Black person, even someone that weren't even like that, didn't grow up here for the most part, that moved here in like their late teens, early adult years, they spent a certain amount of time here, they're seasoned, maybe even British citizens or eligible for it imminently. You're British, you're very British, more so than you may even, because the thing about being British is it's imprecise. There's so many forms of being British. Do you want to localize it? Do you understand? Like, how do you contour it? Do you see what I'm saying? So there's going to be an increase outside of the cultural component. The culture and the ideologies precipitate the increase in terms of like, increased mixed offspring and so on and so forth. What you're going to find is you're definitely going to find more mixing, but it won't just be, for example, straight black and white, for instance. It's going to be all over the gaff. Like I don't know, Bayesian and Sierra Leone and Jamaica and this place and that place. That's one. Then you'll be seeing mixed. Maybe someone's half Chinese, half Jamaican, then get with someone that's half Filipino, half Nigerian. You're going to start seeing a lot more of that, and almost like a kind of collapsed social identity based on vagaries of popular culture. Because even outside of, let's say we use Black UK as a case study, even outside of so-called Black people, there are still Asians and white, relatively young people that believe that they're in touch with prevailing popular culture, that still anchor part of their identities to the Black popular culture they consume. So they see themselves as part of this kind of urban type of population, if you will. If you get my drift. So, you know, it's one of them ones. It's quite complex, and that's why identity politics will never disappear. Whether that's in the diaspora, whether it's back home, whether it's someone that's doing transnationalism, this place coast to coast, makes no difference. Identity politics is always going to be a thing. That's just a constant.
I hear that. KB Jones, I hope that appeases your question. Salute to you. We've got another question from online account. He says, Falcon, my question is, how Diego looks at interracial dynamic in the UK in relation to Black identity in the UK. Can you do you get the question?
Yeah. I believe so. So effectively, the increase in interracial coupling and by extension the offspring, how is that going to impact on Black identities? How people ideate as Black? It's a very good question, because from the 1991 census, mixed race people had not become mixed race. They were classified as Black other, which is why if you look at the stats between 1991 and 2001, the percentage of mixed other it plummets, because obviously everybody's decamped into the mixed categories, right? So all it means is that the popular culture is gradually going to start to reflect this very assimilated type of society, the society with loads of people from different cultures, different worldviews and mores that just collapse into one. That's what's going to happen. And even if you look at like the drill music, for example, which, you know, even in terms of like not to give anyone like any plugs, but Central C, Sprinter with Dave. Central C is, for the most part, you could argue he's white. Technically, he's got part Indo-Guyanese and some other stuff, but he's, for the most part, you look at him, he says he's white, you're not going to dispute it, right? But he is now more or less elevated in terms of popularity to a similar level to Dave, who is Black. And so in terms of their popularity, you don't have to look too hard. You'll find an Asian person bumping the track, really enthusiastic about the music scene, yada, 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 yada. It's already starting to happen. You understand? You know, where people, you got other drill artists that are white, that are not seen as any less credible, despite it being a Black music genre, than the Black artists that are also in that genre. It's already starting to happen. You've got a lot of people that are, it's one thing to just reflect the environment that you came up in, but you've got people that have really went out of their way to adopt many what they consider to be English and British airs and dispositions, mannerisms. I'm not just saying mode of speech, but literally mannerisms, and almost trying to identify certain kind of mainstream opinion and assimilate it as their own worldview, whether or not they're fully convinced of the merits of it. You understand? So you're already starting to see the assimilation is already in full swing. And so I wrote in my book, the increase in a mixed population is a natural phenomenon, whether people like it or not. It just is the nature of the beast. And sorry, I got distracted by the reviews. And ultimately, it's just what it is. No, it's cool. No, I wasn't saying it in a bad way. But yeah, look, it just reflects an inevitability, and it's the final frontier. Once you have the cultural assimilation taking place, I've given the example of popular culture transforming, if you will, ever so, it's almost happening in plain sight. But gradually, what's going to happen? If you look, for example, at KB Jones, he's done a great job of compiling, TV, Black media, right? What will now happen is you'll have archive repositories like that, where if people want a real cultural consumption of what it was, in terms of like what it was to be in quote Black or black representation from a certain time in recent history, that's where you'd go to. But these Gen Zs are not, blackness is not going to resonate with them as much. Whereas we and the older generations can look at blackness not just in terms of the popularization of it, but the very real and lived experiences of the identity politics. It's not going to be as deep for them. Doesn't mean that they may not experience varying degrees of discrimination or stuff, but by and large, you're going to have a cultural collapse, a collapse of different cultures, and it's just going to mainstream. You know, people shouldn't get it twisted. You know how you've got an increase in black TV shows, whether it was, I think there was one with ZZ Mills and someone else where I might have been on Channel 4 or E4. I forget which platform, but they got a slot. And you have what else you have? You have Mo Gilligan, for example. I'm saying that these are indications of the mainstreaming of popular culture, where popular culture, you can't even necessarily say it's black anymore. It might be prefaced by black faces. It may have black collaborators, innovators, and creators. But when all is said and done, I can't, and I'm sure you can't call it black popular culture no more. Keeping in mind, much of the customer base, the capital, is from non-black audiences. So certain people take it for granted, this music actor, that person, or this person, oh my goodness, they're so great. There are people, we should gatekeep these people. Why are they stepping out of the community? Da, 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 da. But meanwhile, you're not putting capital into these people's pockets. So what I'm trying to say is that popular culture, which is the nexus of contemporary black identities, is not static. It's evolving, it's changing, it's becoming more mainstream. And so that is the direction that the Gen Zs are more or less kind of, you know, that's really what they can expect.
Well put, very well put, very well put. Any more questions? Feel free to put them in the chat. It's getting a bit late, so we might wind it down. But before we did, I just really wanted to read at least 1 or 2 reviews, just so you understand the impact that the book is having. Okay, so we've got 1 review. Ethnic Escapism, 5 stars, by the way. And The Black Burden is a concise and informative book that offers valuable insights into racial issues. The author's ability to present complex concepts in an understandable manner is commendable. The book provides historical context and social analysis, shedding light on the struggles faced by marginalized communities, while a more thorough exploration of intersectionality, and personal narratives would have enhanced the book. It remains a significant contribution to the discourse of racial equality and social justice. Recommended for those seeking a deeper understanding of racial oppression. Okay, very thorough review right there. Many other reviews on the Amazon site, so really good to see. 5 stars. Okay, and guys, I know this probably sounds, I probably sound like a hype man right now, right? But I absolutely do not have any kind of connections or getting any cut from the book. This is absolutely just something that I've always been wanting to express with the way Diego has always articulated these these talking points, his information, and the way it's just culminated into a book. I think that's very powerful, man. There's something powerful about publishing a book, you know? It's similar to creating a video even. It's a concept in your mind. You know, sometimes I'll quickly write notes about something that's quite interesting, and then somehow it transforms into something that materializes in the real world. You know, so for me, there's something very powerful about that, and I'm very happy to see Diego Ife's success. And I really want everyone, all of us, to support, including myself. I wanted to put on a show and show you and show myself buying the book, but I'm gonna, be a bit more decent and show some humility. But I'm gonna buy the hard copy because it's all about showing support, man. So any final words, brother Diego? Any closing thoughts?
Before I give my thank yous and acknowledgements, I think there was one question by online account about, is it racial dynamics or is it relationships or something along them lines?
The
See if I can.
interracial. Let me see if I can find it. Is it? Well, it wasn't this one, right?
I
Or
think
was
it
it an
might
earlier
have
one?
been. I feel like, God, where is it now? It was
It might have
something to
been
do with.
Mhm.
See.
As we browse in the chat, guys, please do let's close it out with likes. Feel free to comment your thoughts below the video after it's aired, and of course,
Okay.
check out the website from Diego.
So I think I found it. It says the Boone podcast. What do you think of the rise of black women, intersectional feminists, and have a toxic influence on the black community in the
Mhm.
UK? How can I best answer this question? So I do believe that globalization has mainstreamed certain ideas. Many ideas, they typically come from like the academy, like universities, like think tanks, and then they now permeate in the mainstream and they influence opinions. I would say that popular culture has certainly, it's popular culture created the gender, what's the word I'm looking for here, the gender war.
Mhm.
Throughout time, there's been discourse within different societies about who, you know, women and men, and having certain friction and what have you. But the gender war has become an integral part of popular culture. And so when people, that is a good question, because it's the sum total of all these influences going all the way back to like TLC, with their kind of, rhetoric. And then, when I say rhetoric, their songs, like the nature of their lyrics. And
Mhm.
then the likes of, say, for example, Destiny's Child. And then you look at some of the TV shows that were on, whether it's Girlfriends, the one with God, who is it now? Is it Tracy Ellis Ross? These are just different thoughts off the top of my head. Where you see more, even like more mainstream stuff, like Sex and the City. What it did was it sold the image of the single woman lifestyle, where you get to have it all, and
Mhm.
that when I say it impacted the dynamic in the sense that, let's just say that the material expectations of black men increased, but not necessarily with the compassion of the challenges that they experience in day-to-day life, and sort of structural issues they have to contend with. So it certainly did that. I would say that there's almost been like what you can call like a what's the word I'm looking for? Will I call it not a carrot and would I call it a carrot and stick approach? Maybe, in other words, where you've got men online who will shame other men for not towing the lines of certain kind of female worldviews, and then the female or woman, whatever, will give him a pat on the back and say, "Job well done." You'll get his doggy biscuit, and it will be a case of rinse and repeat. You know, certainly that kind of gynocentric, gynocratic popular culture that we have today started decades back. So, and the thing about feminism, and I'll say this much and I'll kind of draw out, but feminism in popular culture was the thing that was the coming out from like your black liberation politics and stuff, in addition with the rise of the cult of celebrity and obsession or preoccupation with celebrityhood or celebrityville. um Feminism also, gained traction. And but the thing about the narrative's metastasized, because a lot of people can sometimes, well, I say they talk past each other. You look at the TV shows that arose as well during that era, whether it's Oprah from around like the 1980s, I don't know if it was the early to mid 1980s, whether you're looking at Ricky Lake, Sally Jesse Raphael, Montel Williams, all these shows were aired in Britain. So a lot of that gender war that took place across the pond transcended and came over here. So, as much as popular culture appears to have kind of created almost like I would say, a misleading sense of togetherness. It's also been divisive, and I would argue it's been more divisive. As much as it's the compass for blackness for many, it's been more divisive than it actually has been a tool of collectivizing and, engendering community sentiment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hope online account, that answers your question. Online account is very very verbal, very kind of inquisitive. So I appreciate your input. But with that being said, man, I think this was a great stream. It's always a pleasure to collaborate with Diego Ife. I'm always learning as well when Diego, kind of speaks. And I'm thinking of new ways of expressing certain ideas as well, which is it's humbling and it's good because it allows us to, um, you know, give birth to new ideas and concepts, which is always good. Self improvement in a nutshell, right? So, Diego, I just want to say thank you for giving us this kind of interview, and appreciate you for creating the book. Um, any closing thoughts at all? Any
Um,
kind of redirection? Hope. Uh,
so yeah, man. Thank you. I want to say thank you to you. Thank you to everybody that has watched today. Whether that's the live show or like the replay. And especially the words of encouragement, whether that was from KP Jones, KB Jones, sorry, online account, Diva. There've been several people, but I just appreciate the support, to be honest. And yeah, it's just great because I mean, to be honest, even though I may be knowledgeable and I may be passionate, I do like the opportunity to, almost speak off the cuff and talk about these topics, my book, etc., etc. These things are a genuine pleasure. So, thanks for having me, and by all means, I appreciate any support. I appreciate any support that people are willing to extend. But ultimately, it's not just support; it is value. It's a value exchange, 100%.
mhm,
And
mhm.
on that note, wish everyone Godspeed, and yeah, I guess until next time.
Yeah, until next time, man. Peace to Diego Ife in the building. Peace. This was an awesome interview, great one-on-one collab with Diego Ife, man. I really appreciate his input. I appreciate everyone who came through though, because you all came out today and you showed significant support. But I hope, please do show support to ethnic escapism and the Black Burden. Okay, you can purchase it from Diego's website. You can also purchase it from Amazon. Okay, so I hope we all show Diego the support that he needs from us. Okay, really appreciate everyone coming through though, as I said. Yep. Expect to stream tomorrow. As you know, Tuesdays and Fridays are the typical streaming times that I will, where I'll deliver live stream content. So look out for tomorrow around the same time from 10 p.m. Big up to everyone who came through. Everyone who's going to watch the video after it's live, do comment your thoughts below. But please do also like the video, share it, subscribe if you are interested/entertained. Okay. But with that being said, it's a late night, but it's a good night, and I'm gonna bid you farewell. And with that being said, peace.